Hi, this is Kelly. You're listening to Vote Her In, a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive, where we look at the movement to elect our first woman president. Today's guest is Ann Moses, the founder and president of Ignite, a movement of young women who are ready and eager to become the next generation of political leaders. Hey everyone, this is Kelly, and this is Vote Her In, a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. I am joined as usual by Rebecca, who will introduce our guest. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, Kelly, and hi, Ann. Our guest today, I'm thrilled to tell everybody, is Ann Moses, the founder of Ignite, which is, as probably some of you know, an amazing organization and shows us a really, I think, bright path to the future. So we thought we would talk with Ann today, and in light of everything that's going on and the need for more and more women to get involved, we thought perhaps she would be inspirational for you as well. So we thought we'd start with asking her to share with us her sort of origin story for Ignite, and then we'll just go into our conversation. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, yeah, tell us about what made you kind of get going and keep on this path as steadfastly as you have.
Well, I would say going way, way back, I kind of harken back to 1992 when I was the age of many of our Ignite women. I was fresh out of college and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. At the time, I was applying to grad school, and I was spending a lot of time at home by day because I was working at night. And what was happening then was that Anita Hill was being questioned on live television by the Senate Judiciary Committee about her experience having worked with Clarence Thomas, then Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas. And it was pretty clear to me at the time that women don't lie about this stuff. And, you know, it seemed so obvious to me that, this candidate for Supreme Court is going to go down. You know, who wouldn't believe this? Even though the questioning of her was pretty unpleasant. And then, I was super shocked to watch with many American women as the vote went in. And in fact, he was confirmed to the Supreme Court. And it was obvious that either the men didn't believe her or didn't really care one way or another. There was very few women on the Senate at that point, and no women on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And, I remember calling my mom then and saying, I can't believe this. Can you believe this? And she said, yeah, of course I can believe this. And so we have women in power. Our rights are going to be functionally meaningless. I would like to say it was from there a straight shot into starting Ignite. That is not how careers go. But fast forward many, many years, I had been working for a long time in the academic and social service sector. And it just felt to me like many of the social problems we were trying to solve one way or another really were better solved by policy than social work. And that the best way to do that was to get women into elected office. At that point, I then went and took a job working for Emily's List. Following that, an organization called Emerge America. And in the context of those particular positions, it just became clear to me that it was impossible then to get women to run, right? And, Emily's List, of course, was funding federal female candidates. And once the candidates were at that level, money was part of the answer for sure. But it was almost impossible to get women to even raise their hands to run. And again, this is a time before 2016. And it just became very clear to me that we weren't getting to women young enough, building their political ambition at an age and developmental stage when they were actually looking at their career aspirations and saying, not keeping the fact that maybe they were interested in public service as a great state secret, and then going into some other career and then discovering at 40 when they were encumbered with children and older folks that they wanted to do it, but it was just too hard at that point. Normalizing political ambition for women. Too many women at that age were keeping it a great secret that they maybe did want to run for office, and then that helped keep them out of it. and just training young women how to do it. So that's why I started Ignite, was to get to women when they were at a phase in their lives where they were looking at what they wanted to do and giving them the empowerment and the tools to do it right away instead of delaying.
I wish you'd been around when I was at that age.
You have no idea how many people I've heard say that.
Yes.
I wish I'd been around when I was at that age too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that so much.
And what would you have said to Kelly if, say, you all had met up at that, or to yourself at that age? What is it that you say to sort of normalize the idea of political ambition?
Well, I would say it's partially it's what we say, and partially it's sort of showing young women that they're not alone in it. And so I'll talk about that first. So one of the ways Ignite works is we have college chapters and on campuses all over the country, and these are clubs basically of politically ambitious young women, and we have all kinds of curricular and activities they do. But when a student wants to start a college chapter, she can grab our toolkit that helps you do that online, which also has all our kind of branded marketing materials and whatnot for social. And so one of our young women, this was years ago, when one of our alumni now was starting the chapter at UC Davis, which was frankly one of our earliest chapters nationally. She found us online and she said, I want to do this. And she posted she was honest with herself that political leadership was something she wanted to pursue, although she felt very timid about it. And she posted on, the then UC Davis Facebook group about, hey, we're going to have our first meeting to see if anyone is interested in this. This is what Ignite's about on this day in this room at this time. And she shows up at the appointed time and in the appointed room, and there are 60 other young women, none of whom know each other in the room. And so that is one way you normalize political ambition, is that you see you're not alone in it. And so I think that actually is one of the hugest ways you can actually normalize political ambition, is just to recognize that, right, to see other people like you, or not like you, but who also want to do this. Once we're in those rooms, we call that out, but we also do a lot of training on what is your personal call to service and how can you articulate that? Because what we've seen with young women in particular is that their personal call to service, the thing that actually uniquely qualifies them to be a leader, to be an elected official, is the thing that they maybe feel like they should hide. So I'll give another example for that. I grew up in public housing in a great deal of poverty. That is, people like that don't get elected to office. Right. Mm-hmm. So that could be the frame. That is the frame a number of our young women will come in with. My dad's in jail. People like me don't get elected to public office. I need to hide those things about myself. Well, in fact, those are the things that actually qualify you to make policy, right? You are better off making policy about public housing if you grew up in public housing than I am, who did not grow up in public housing. It is a unique qualifier for you, which isn't to say that other people can't get educated and do that. But their very lights, the things that make them qualified are the things they were trying to hide under a bushel. And we, help them reframe that so that it comes out. And then they suddenly start to see that what they perceived as their weaknesses are in fact their greatest assets. And it's those kind of simple, just mental framework shifts that really make a difference. That, and then seeing the fact that, oh my God, I'm one of many. I am not really alone in political ambition. There are actually loads of me. They're all over this campus. And then once those college chapters get going, or likewise in our high school programs, these young women are in rooms with each other. It just changes everything, right? They begin to see themselves as part of a larger movement.
So I know Kelly has made this transition from one aspect of, or focus of her life, I should say, to another on the being politically active young woman. I'm wondering, Kelly, what are your thoughts about what Anne is saying here?
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. I was certainly one of those kind of young women who thought politics sounds really great. I'm going to go into it, and then just never sort of had the tools to figure that out, that next piece out and just sort of left that behind. And, now I'm one of those, women in their 40s with kids and a lot of other things standing in the way. And, it would have been nice to start earlier. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Are you seeing increased interest among young women? So you started this in 2010. And so in the 9 years you've been doing this, has interest been going up? It seems like more people in general are becoming interested in politics, but how is that reflected in the work that you're doing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, since 2016, it's been a deluge, right? So, so after 2016, there was kind of a lull, just to remind everyone what happened then. There was kind of a lull right after the election where people were kind of licking their wounds and figuring out what did this mean. And then, of course, the Women's March happened, the third week in January of 2017. And frankly, in the run up to the Women's March and since then, Ignite has been on the receiving end of 5 times the rate of women contacting us from all over the country. And, I know there was a lot of press around that right after in 2017 about, oh my God, 60,000 people signed up for Emily's list and so on. But I think what I've heard anecdotally from my colleagues who are in all these organizations that reported that surge is that it was kind of a one-time, like for a period of a few months, and then it stopped. And for us, it has not stopped. It has continued and continued and continued all over the country, every day, constantly. And so I think the election of 2016 and then frankly, what happened in the months that ensued really did a couple of things to young women. One is that I feel like for young women, women historically have felt less qualified to run for office than men anyway. And for young women, you feel less qualified because you are not yet, in fact, right? You're young, you haven't finished your education and had a full career. But I also think the notion of what qualified means shifted after 2016. And I have said this, and I'll say, I always give this qualifier. I in no way mean for this to be construed as a partisan statement, but we did elect our current president has the least qualifications to hold this office of any person we've ever elected to this office before. First of all, in terms of traditional qualifications for any kind of elected office, right? No history of public service and whatnot. And so I think it lowered the bar in terms of like behavior and how he comports himself, right? I think it lowered the bar in terms of what we think of as like, what does it mean to be qualified to run for office and to hold office? What does it mean to be qualified, interpersonally to hold these offices? And so I think it lowered the bar. And then I think what happened is young women got out on the streets at that first Women's March. And then, soon thereafter, during March for Our Lives and all the marches that ensued. And if they never asked themselves the question, well, who will vote for me? Well, the answer was right there. And so I think it just took the lid off for young women. And the lid has remained off. And we are constantly, we get calls and emails and texts and tweets all day, every day.
How do you, Anne, to me, your point about the president having no qualifications or the right temperament or beliefs, I can say that and be totally partisan. It's sort of a double-edged sword in the sense that, we do, most of us want people who are well qualified, well schooled, have had some public service experience. And yet there is this problem or this challenge for women, as you point out, which is that, they still have the majority of home care and child care responsibilities and all of that. So how do you say to a young woman who's, early college age or just graduating, how do you say to her, well, gee whiz, I know you want to run for city council and it's a complicated job. And, here's how we're going to help you not only be psychologically prepared, but sort of intellectually prepared.
So what we do at Ignite is, among other things, we train young women on the tactics. How do you run for office, right?
Right.
So what are the skills or, just the activities that you need to undertake in order to run for office? So there's that side of things. We do train on policy, but not so much what to think, but how to think. So to take the most pressing and, high stakes policy issue, which is reproductive rights, which is, in fact, so one of the things that we do at Ignite is instead of saying, so when I say reproductive rights, most people will respond by thinking abortion. Well, in fact, that term, reproductive rights or women's health or all the different terms that we use to euphemize this have to do with about 10 issues. Everything that starts with what do you get to know and when do you get to know it and who gets to tell you, right? Mm-hmm. All the way to abortion and a whole bunch of issues in between. And so we want young women to have a nuanced perspective and deep understanding of what do these terms mean and what are all the policy topics that come underneath them. And then what do you think about those policy topics? I mean, you and I could actually agree on 8 out of the 10 of the policy topics that come under reproductive rights, right? It's not that binary. And then our message to them is frankly, get started early. Men are not holding themselves to the highest standard of what office they should run for, what skills they should they have, what experiences must they have, right? And while I would love it if every candidate was super qualified for everything, that's not always going to be the case. And I trust women to get there and study hard and learn what they need to know and do the job right. One of the fun things that happens at Ignite is every now and then, if we'll do a how to run for office training on a college campus, some guys will show up. And when you go around the room and say, introduction, tell me your name and what office you want to run for, the women who are there knowing full well that it's a training on how to run for office will say their name and list their accolades, and all the incredible things they're doing, and then sort of hem and haw and say, well, I'm thinking I might want to run for city council someday, And then John in the corner will be like, hey, I'm John. I'm an econ major and I want to be U.S. Senator. And you know what? I'm like, good on John, right? We're asking them to state an ambition. But I think that, it's always a great moment when the women realize they're killing themselves and holding themselves to this ridiculous standard. And Doofy John in the corner is perfectly happy to say he wants to be U.S. Senator with no apparent qualifications and the most average major in the country. So, I think I don't want to send the message that women must be personally qualified and have every policy proposal thought through before they even, run for a part-time, low-paid municipal position.
When you mentioned I want to run for senator, just a quick story there for you and our listeners. Debbie Stabenow, the senior senator from Michigan, who's in her she's almost 70 now. She started running in her mid-20s for the county commission and in Lansing, Michigan. And she tells this story, which I shared with people in my book, Every Day is Election Day, about just dive right in. And when I figured out that I'm paraphrasing Debbie here, she said, I really cared about the medical services for people who were under the care of county government. And she thought to herself, I can figure this out. I can go home tonight and read every single thing I need to read, and whatever I haven't read tomorrow. And sure enough, that's what she's done for 45 years.
That's exactly right. I mean, typically people run for office because they care about one thing that they see that they can impact in their local or, county government. And then they figure out the rest. So, and that's what we tell our young women, So you are here because you're really driven by the urge to fix this thing. But you'll come across other things and you'll get educated on those things and you'll do it in real time. It'll be fine.
So one thing I think about a lot, I had always assumed I would have daughters and then I would raise them to be these, strong women and do things like run for office. And of course I had sons and I love my sons dearly. But, how do I, as someone who is not the mother of daughters, what are the kinds of things I should be doing to help encourage more young women to be thinking about running for office?
Well, I would say you can start with your sons, actually. I have one son and 2 daughters. And I think, and even doing this work, I realized how much I wasn't doing with my daughters. So, and my son. I remember when Hillary Clinton was running for president the first time in 2007, and I took my kids up to the local farmers market, and someone I knew was canvassing for Hillary in the primary. And and was very strident about it, and my kids actually looked and they were like, there's never been a girl president. Right. And kids have this great sense of fairness, and also just, and a kind of the things that we've accepted as normal, they have not accepted as normal. They will fast. They will soon. That quickly became normalized. But originally they started with a sense of outrage, all three of them, right? That's messed up. Why hasn't there been a girl president, And so I think it's up to us to educate our sons about the fact that there is no gender parity. We're nowhere near it. The reasons why there isn't, and why does it matter? Because it's not just about fair and right, actually. It's about these moments where nuanced policy gets made because somebody has a different perspective. And the reason they have a different perspective is because they have a different life experience, right? And so those moments when, and I think that's the case with your daughters as well. Sexual assault, now my kids are older and they're on college campuses. And so sexual assault on college campus, which was when Senators Gillibrand and McCaskill put forth that legislation, right. It's not like it was a new thing. By the way, there was sexual assault on college campus when I was there too. We called it date rape back then, right? And that was considered a new thing. But it was not a new thing. And so, but the fact that someone made policy about it or tried to make policy about it was only because it was two women who'd had the experience, right? It was their experience. And in fact, men, very conservative men, came right on board for that legislation because they didn't like it either, right? It just had never occurred to them. It was something to legislate against because it had never occurred to them it was happening, right? Because it wasn't their experience. So I think part of it is just, explaining to our kids what the world looks like, explaining to them, why it looks the way it looks, like showing them examples of here's how it can be changed, right? And here's where it matters to have people that aren't like you in all sorts of ways making policies, right? People who are like you, people who aren't like you, all kinds of different people. That is the best way to make, that's just the best way to make decisions.
Right. And speaking of a girl president, I love that phrase. You and I and Kelly and lots of women have bonded over the idea of wouldn't it be great to elect our first girl president in 2020? And I'm wondering, yes. I know you've thought about this a lot, and of course I thank you for blurbing my book on the topic, but in terms of the Ignite work, do you find that that's a motivating idea or cause or mission in the current context?
It's interesting. I mean, we just did all this research on Gen Z women and our women. So I think, frankly, so research bears this out, and I see it as well. I think, frankly, so Gen Z women are more liberal than any other generation. We just know that we know this from research. And I would say part of it has to do with, or rather, I will say, our register as Democrats at higher rates than any other generation. I think part of that has to do with the fact that we have a president now who is very far to the right of what the Republican Party used to be, right? And so, and the president becomes a de facto leader of the party. And so there's kind of a problem over there. And at the end of the day, what I see is that young people and young women in particular, who identify as liberal and or Democrat, are desperate, first and foremost, to get the president out. And that is that is the thing they care about most. I think that is the thing that most Democrats care about most. As for the identity politics around electing a woman for a woman's sake, not necessarily, actually. I have not seen that as much. I mean, Ignite women are different because we lead with this. But what I'm seeing from young women generally, and we just did a large study on Gen Z women nationally, is that it's less about identity politics. Party is most important first for people, much more than gender. So if you ask a Democratic woman, is she for a woman president or a Democratic president, and the Republican is a woman and the Democrat is not, they will vote Democrat first. That is the way our country's going with this hyperpartisanship. What we're seeing with our young women, and it's anecdotal, is that they would like a woman president, but They're more interested in the policy perspective than they are about the demographic characteristics of the candidate. So, for instance, we've had young women who are biracial, Black and Asian, and then in the same sentence will say, but don't expect me to vote for Kamala Harris because just because she shares my identity, I don't like her past policies on criminal justice reform, for instance, right? So I think it can't just be a female candidate on its face. It has to be a candidate who also espouses at least some of the issues and policies that these young women hold dear.
I understand what you're saying, and there's, of course, lots of data on people are, increasingly, I'm a Democrat, I'm voting for a Democrat. If we say that, it is about the policies, and these women are pro-choice women, does that change the dynamic on the theory, for instance, that once they're in office, as you pointed out before, women bring a different perspective to governance and policy and therefore might do things that, for instance, a male pro-choice candidate might not?
So the top 4 issues that young people care about are in this order: mass shootings and climate change, education and racial inequality. Those are the top 4 issues that young people care about. The bottom 4 issues that young people care about: infrastructure and investment, drug legalization, because frankly it's happening, right? LGBTQ rights, because frankly that's happening, and abortion. So now that's not to say that young women don't care about abortion and aren't pro-choice. They are in fact the most pro-choice generation. But those are not the issues driving them to pick candidates at the moment. Now, I think there's an enormous opportunity for the pro-choice movement to capitalize on what has recently happened. And there's a reason why abortion and abortion rights have not been high on the list of issues that young women cared about. It's because they've grown up in a world where this felt guaranteed, right? I mean, and so I actually think what's happened in the last 6 months has really slapped them around, and I think that it's going to start moving up to the top. But I also think there's an enormous, if choice is your issue, the pro-choice movement should be grabbing onto this and educating the next generation, because while they are pro-choice, they don't see it as a thing they need to necessarily fight for. It's different, right? So I don't think that is a motivator for young women right now. No, I think having a woman candidate for president is a bonus, but not if they're, not prioritizing policies to address mass shootings and climate change, which are the top 2 issues.
Right.
And so I'm sort of shocked when I watch the Democratic debates and all they do is yammer on about healthcare. I'm like, can someone move off this? Because this is not a motivating factor for young women or young people, right? Yeah. I mean, you forget young people, Gen Z, they're on their parents' healthcare thanks to Obamacare. They're either working, they're on school healthcare, or they're on their parents' healthcare. Healthcare is not a proximate issue for this generation. It will be, but it's just they've got bigger fish to fry right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things about that, I'm guessing here, but is the fact that, people who are older and who are more concerned about health care and are underemployed, which happens to an awful lot of people by the age of 50, they vote in greater numbers than younger people, at least they have to date. So if you're looking to capture voters on the issue they care about, I mean, that's my guess as to a part of the reason for that.
Totally, but they're ignored. But I have to say, if you look at the vote totals for 2018, pardon me, Gen Z had the highest increase of any demographic group by a lot. And so if you look at the vote and what happens in the midterm predicts what's going to happen in the next presidential, it's usually 100% plus 5. So meaning whatever a group voted at, whatever the youngest generation voted at in the midterm, double it and add 5 points. That means Gen Z women could be turning out between 75 and 80% in 2020.
Well,
that is off the charts. I think it's going to happen. That's so much more than they voted for than the youngest generation voted for Obama in 2008. I mean, so the reason why the polls, they're playing to the older voters because they're, and I'm putting this in air quotes, reliable. Well, reliable means you can find them on the voter rolls and poll them, right? That's what it means. But Gen Z is going to be unreliable by definition. They only could have possibly voted twice, right? So they're not even showing up as reliable voters. You can't find them. They move all the time. That's what young people do. They change cell phone numbers and every time there's a new plan, right? They can't even port their number half the time. These people are unlocatable. And then we talk about the polls of these people who are my age and older as though they're dogma. And they didn't, let's put it this way. The polls didn't work out in 2016. What makes us think they're going to be so reliable in 2018? They're polling the same people. So I am of the mind that Gen Z women are going to turn out in massive numbers and actually turn the election.
Well, Anne, I will say to you that this is the best news I've heard in weeks. Absolutely.
I feel very strongly about it because we're seeing them as highly, highly motivated. I mean, and of course the Ignite women are, that times 3, yeah. But actually, if you look at the data just on non-Ignite Gen Z women, they're much more active than any generation that preceded them. And I think that's a direct result of what happened in 2016.
I'm curious about in the wake of Me Too, we're at about the 2-year anniversary now of Me Too going viral, not the beginning of the movement, but going viral. And if you're seeing an effect from that on the types of women, the young women who come forward wanting to run, or the stories they're telling, or anything like that is really showing the influence of that movement.
It's so funny. I don't know is the answer. Like, it was so wrapped up in everything else that's been happening. It's really hard to tease it out. I mean, it had a huge impact on me personally. And I think just as a mother, kind of what we tell our daughters about how to navigate the world. I mean, I would say it's funny. I remember when the video of Donald Trump, the Entertainment Tonight or Extra, whatever that video was. And I remember when that came, and I had seen it already, and I came home, and my oldest daughter, who is decidedly the least, overtly political kid in the family, meaning she doesn't want to pursue it. She's interested in it, but with a glass door, and I was coming up the stairs, our front door, and she came running at the door. This is very uncharacteristic of her, holding her phone up to me as I came up to the door, screaming, "Have you seen this?" Right? Mm-hmm. Outraged. So I thought, oh, wow, that was pretty big for her. And I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with my own young women in the house and other young women of Ignite across the country. And, la plus ça change, la plus c'est la même chose. Like, you'd like to think things are getting better for teenagers and 20-something women. And I think it is slowly getting better, but I think mostly what is better is just an awareness of, oh, we're not supposed to say that or do that anymore. It doesn't mean that the action necessarily happens, but at least it's checked on some level. But I don't know. I feel like it's one thing of many, because if you think about it, it's so hard to tease out. Like, think about what happened after 2016. We had a massive women's march, and then Parkland happened, and then this massive March for Our Lives, and another women's march. I mean, I'm not even getting the order of things right? And Me Too and Time's Up, and it was all happening all at the same time. And I think it's just harder for you. It's hard to tease out which one of these things had the greatest impact. It's more just been like this crazy deluge that just won't ease up, and that is working to keep women of all ages, and young women in particular, super energized. And then I would say the fact that 2018 was in fact the actual first quote unquote year of the woman since 1992. I mean, it was really the first time there had been a huge surge since 1992. How pathetic is that? I think that had a massive impact on young women, particularly because there was this narrative around newcomers and young women. And granted, it wasn't actually that many people, but there was so much press noise around it. Like AOC, I think, has done more to convince young women across the country that this is possible. And she's just one lady, just one person. But the attention can do a lot. So yeah, I don't know that Me Too has been, more than
the cumulative effect.
Yeah. I think like Emma Gonzalez, when I think about, I feel like the things that change people's opinions about what's possible have more to do with personal narratives and sort of, stories. And so when I think about the things that actually shook up and made young women sort of wake up and realize, oh, I can do this. It was like, AOC.
Seeing other young women.
Emma Gonzalez. Yeah, like these women, Greta Thunberg. Like seeing like, oh my God, there are people out there that aren't so different than me, that aren't that far away from me, that can do this. I can do this too.
Right. Right. Well, speaking of I can do this too, and as you put it a moment ago, not easing up, and we have a wonderful audience of very motivated, mostly women listeners. If you would share with them the website and any other information you want them to have as they learn more about Ignite and get involved and tell their daughters.
Sure. So our website is www.ignitenational.org. And in terms of a call to action, I would say if any of your listeners have daughters who are school age, meaning K through 12, we have curricula that's K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12 that is licensable on a sliding scale basis by schools and community-based organizations. If you go on the website, you can find that. It's pretty easy. There's a homepage, has all the buttons you could possibly need. If you have a daughter who's in college, she can go online and look and say, search quickly, is there a chapter at my college? And then if there is, she can quickly get connected to that chapter. If there isn't, she can start one. There's a quick button you can push to get a toolkit and get going. Anytime you go on our website and do any of these things, you'll get a follow-up the minute you sign up for anything. We do conferences in regions across the country, and young women and educators are welcome to join those to learn more about licensing, and young women just to get involved. And, I would invite you to talk to your kids about being political and joining our movement.
Terrific. And thank you, Anne, so much. This was lively and interesting, and I feel energized as I always want to feel at the end of these conversations.
Yes.
Hopeful. There's hope.
Yes, terrific. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.